Welcome to Song and Story Time. If you hear some noise going on in here, it's because we just finished the worship service, and so we still have quite a few people in this space.
And that's okay.
And that is just fine. Well, remember to text in to let us know that you are here. The number is 260-593-1983. Again, 260-593-1983. And today's question of the week is this: does this scripture sound familiar to you? Love God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. Where have you heard that before? Text in, let us know you're here so we can give you a shout out. But let's have some sing-along time now.
God made the earth, God made the sky, God made the clouds go floating by. God made the earth, God made the sky, God made the clouds go floating by. God made the fish deep in the sea, God made you and God made me. God made the sun, God made the sun, God made the moon, God made the birds and the big raccoon. God made the flowers, God made the trees, God made you and God made me. And God knows your name, children. Listen, God says, I have called you. I have called you by name. You are mine. Listen, God says, I have called you. I have called you by name. You are mine. Listen, God says, I have called you. I have called you by name. You are mine. What's your name?
Kiara.
Kiara. I have called you by name. You are mine. What's your name? I have called you by name. You are mine. Listen, God says, I have called you. I have called you by name. You are mine. Listen, God says, I have called you. I have called you by name. You are mine.
All right, welcome back. Let's see, that was a short song time, so let's see if any of you had time to dial in. We've got Hannah Lind here.
Hi,
Hannah, I'm so glad you're here with us again. And we also have the Gunawan family in here with us. Hello, Mara. Hello, Caleb. Hello, Matthew. And Martin and Chica. We're glad to have you as well. Yes, they've got some awesome paper airplanes in here. Well, I have a question. Do you know where you've heard that scripture before? Love God with all your heart and soul and strength. What, Matthew? This is the story song. Yeah, we sang it in there. It's the Shema, isn't it? All right, well, let's review the big story before we talk more about that. God created, and it was good. Humans missed the mark, and God stuck with them. God called a family. When the people became slaves, God sent Moses and delivered them. They learned to live in Shalom community. They learned that there is only one God, and we love God with all our being. The people got to the promised land. They got in a cycle of missing the mark, and God sent judges. God called Samuel to be a prophet, but the people wanted a king. So Samuel anointed kings. Solomon built a temple in Jerusalem to be a gathering place for the people of God. But all the kings continued to miss the mark, and the kingdom divided into the north, Israel, and the south, Judah. God worked through prophets and stuck with the people, even as first the north and then the south kingdom fell to foreign superpowers. Many of the people were captured and put into exile, and others were left in the ruins of what had been their home. In exile, the people learned a lot. They learned how to worship God, and they learned about God's hope. And after 70 years, the exiled people were allowed to return. They rebuilt Jerusalem, and they rebuilt the temple. They waited for a Messiah. God sent Jesus, a baby Messiah who was announced by angels, visited by shepherds and magi, and proclaimed by Simeon and Anna. When Jesus' life was in danger, his parents fled with him to Egypt and stayed there until it was safe for them to come back and settle in Nazareth. Jesus grew up in the wisdom of God and was baptized by his cousin John. He called many disciples and named 12 apostles to join him in his work. Jesus taught what it means to live inside the blessing at the heart of God. Jesus walked on water, fed multitudes, and welcomed children. And welcomed who? Children. Yes. And now we come to this week's story. So let's begin with our micro song. There's our key. What's most important? Which way to end this life? Love God with all your heart and with all your mind, your strength and your being. And love your neighbor as you love yourself. But who is my neighbor? You are a neighbor when you treat other humans with compassion and mercy, whoever they are. Whoever they are.
So many of us have heard this story today and heard this stories before.
Yeah, they're kind of two scripture passages today.
Yep. So the one that we acted out during children's time, that we often call the Good Samaritan story, is one of the first stories that we told children when they're young. And this is an example of the way that Jesus taught. So Malachi, can you tell us a little bit more about that, about how Jesus taught?
Jesus sometimes talked in parables, like the Good Samaritan, which was a parable. A parable is usually a story that is told to kind of illustrate something. And often when Jesus was asked a question, he, instead of really explaining it in a
lot of words.
way, he told a parable.
Yeah, he wouldn't really give a dictionary definition.
No, he just tells a story.
Yeah, yep.
And parables are usually more complex than they seem at first, and usually have a bunch of layers to them.
Yeah, it's true. So the question here in this story, who is my neighbor? And Jesus answers that by telling this parable. So Zeph, what is Jesus really saying here in this parable?
So he actually is saying that, people, it's not about what your personalities are. It's actually about who you are.
Who you are and how you help others, isn't it?
Yep. Yeah, it's about how we do things. How to be a neighbor is what Jesus is getting at here.
So
how are we supposed to be good neighbors? What's one way we could do that?
We can be good neighbors by helping other people. And let's go back to when Malachi said the stuff about the parables part. So
Do you have
Joseph
parable?
did something that was a little similar to that by interpreting dreams is how
those dreams were a little like parables, weren't they? Like illustrations of what people needed to know.
That's true.
You know
That's
what?
true.
I'm thinking about that idea of helping people who need help as a way to be a good neighbor. Hey, Caleb, what's a way that you helped a lot of people be good neighbors a couple weeks ago? You brought coffee to people with your dad?
Yep.
There were a lot of, Caleb's Ark. Yeah, a lot of people got to practice being good neighbors, and
Yep.
they were encouraged to do that with your ark.
Yeah, from that idea and your encouragement, a lot of good stuff happened. Thank you.
And
So, but
It's-
the way that you did that, though, is a lot like kind of the Jewish understanding of who is my neighbor. Because for the people who would have heard this story first from Jesus, they would have defined neighbor as anyone you're connected to in any way. So if you hear someone's story, well, then they're your neighbor. It's not just about who you live next to or who you might pass on the street, although that's part of it too. Who do you see? But also, whose story do you know?
So, like the people at Dunkin' Donuts in Wichita who learned about Caleb's story have become your family's neighbors.
Yep. So in this understanding for Jesus' first hearers, the smallest connection makes you a neighbor.
So, how are you going to be a neighbor this week? And how are you going to let others be neighbors to you this week? Sometimes that's even harder to let other people be your neighbor. We're going to see if
gonna
there are more.
check.
Yes. Oliver has heard about loving your neighbor at church, including in Bible school. Oliver and Ellis and Rachel are
great.
here with us. Dakota and Briggs. Hello,
Hi, guys.
Dakota and Briggs.
saw Violet and Lydia running around.
Yeah, Violet and Lydia and Ivy are here too somewhere, aren't they? And we've got Don Yost joining us in here as well.
Laps around.
They might be doing some laps because it's fun to do that in here. And Deb Kaufman is here. Hello, Deb. Thank you for your music this morning. And Deb says she loves the review of this story every week. Glad you love it because we do it every week.
And we'll say hi to the sound booth without them texting in.
Yeah,
this morning.
you all don't have to text in. We know you're here, and we're so glad you're here with us.
Yeah, we know you're here by us knowing that our microphones work.
That's right. When we can hear ourselves talk, we know the sound booth is on it. All right, let's sing the big story. I mean, the big song. Hold it up there so we can hear you. Here we go.
This is the story of how it all began. God made matter and chaos shattered. Eve and Adam, they tried to hide. The world got violent and God replied with a mark and a flood and a rainbow sign. God's love written on skin and sky. Then God called a family to be a blessing to the earth. A mother and her favorite son wrestle for the blessing. Another son becomes a slave. The land is saved from famine. God's family grows. Egypt oppressed as they groan to God. And God sends Moses 10 strange signs. Say, please release them. By the sea, God saves them. The people complain, and God rains bread, daily food, and 10 new rules. 5 sisters come and ask for land. God says, yes, amend the law. Moses says, in your new life across the Jordan, love God with your whole heart and with all your being and your strength. Now listen, God is one, only God. God is one, only God. Cross over Jordan, stories and stones, circuits and shouts, and the walls come down. God sends judges like Deborah, and the land has rest. Ruth's worth more than 7 sons, redeem the lost with steadfast love. Corruption in the temple, and God sends Samuel. God gives them a prophet, they ask for a king. Does God need a temple? A wise king forgets. And when a bully rules a land, the nation tears apart and loses David's heart. Through a widow's gift and a prophet's cry, God brings life in desperate times. Josiah reads a misplaced scroll. He turns to God wholeheartedly,
like David did in his time. God gives Jeremiah a picture of God's ruined family. Is there any hope left? Is there any hope left? Is there any hope left for you? Jerusalem, any hope left? Is there any hope left for you? Jerusalem. By the streams of Babylon, how can we sing when you are gone? Jerusalem, Jerusalem. I'm in a valley of human bones. These bones are Israel. God's breath is hope. Haman plans death for Esther's exiles. She risked her life so they might survive. Finally, God's family rebuilds a temple in Jerusalem. God plunges them into a sea of joy and celebration of only God. God is one, only God. Comfort to Jerusalem, your warfare finally ceases. Matthew lists these generations, Abraham to Jesus. The angel says you'll have a son, and God will give him David's throne. Mary says, God looked at me, now I'm the luckiest person around. Mary, now a pregnant fiancée, makes the grueling journey. She has her baby. Shepherds see angels declaring God's glory and peace among people. The spirits and shepherds and elders and prophets to tell those who wait their Messiah has come. Herod gets nervous, the Magi find Jesus. They hide their discovery and hurry back home. Once again an angel comes to Joseph, so they make good their escape. Oh, Jesus in the temple, astonishing the crowd. Jesus with his parents, Jesus growing up. Down by the Jordan with the prophet John, Jesus asked to be baptized, and the skies are open. A dove descends, a voice from heaven says, this is my son, the son I love. I'm pleased with him. Jesus calls disciples to be with him in the work he's doing. Oh, Jesus teaches the disciples. This is life inside the blessing. You're blessed, you who are empty. You're blessed, all you who mourn. You're blessed, you who ache for God, whose inner life is pure. This is life inside the blessing. Jesus walks on the water. Peter tries and begins to sink. Jesus grabs his hand and the wind dies down. Jesus sees the crowds with compassion, so he teaches them for days and days. The people are hungry, there's baskets left over, and no one left out. People bring their children to Jesus. Jesus blesses them and says you must accept God's good government like a little child would, or you won't get it at all. Oh, what's most important? Love God with everything and love your neighbor, whoever that may be. God loves every one of us, it's true, and God loves the universe.
Woo, that's a long song.
It is a long song. Well,
That's
and you
a good
know,
one.
this is week 41, and if there are
have to get
52 weeks in a year, it means we only have 11 weeks left.
Yeah.
And this series is done.
We're getting close.
All right. Thanks for another great week. I'll make sure. Yep, I think that's all the call outs. And we will see you next week.
See you next week.
Bye.